Thank you. And I just like to note that Vice Chair Howerton did ask for an excused absence for today's meeting. Thank you. And then do we have any adjustments to the agenda? Any announcements? And then I need do we have one more? Where'd he go? Do we need Mayor Pro Tem to do the action items for a few more minutes? Okay, so then I need a motion to approve the minutes for both June 5th and September 4th.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes pass for both dates. Thank you. And then any city or county manager priority items? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
The city doesn't have any priority items at this time.
Okay, thank you.
None for the county.
Thank you. And then next up, we have Aaron Kane with Growth Management New Cases Summary. Hey, Aaron, good morning.
Morning. Excuse me. I'll run through these fairly quickly. We have 5 cases to review. First one is Durham Gateway at Briar Creek, looking to rezone from RR and CG on the Durham County side to R4 and R4 on the Wake County side. It would all be incorporated into the city of Durham with up to 1,750 residential uses, which would be a mix of single family, townhouse, apartment, and so forth, with 175 of the units being income restricted to 80% area median income, or I'm good, okay, or less. We received this application at the end of May. It's currently going through the review process, and I can show, well, it's turned sideways, so that's not going to be of much help. But you have the map in your packet if there's any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Okay.
That was easy for
Sure.
you.
Okay. The next case is Page Corners. This would be a 100% fully affordable project that would be using LIHTC financing for apartments at the corner of Chin Page Road and Page Road. There has been talk about a potential development agreement for this site, though we have not yet had a formal application to do so.
Aaron,
yes.
as you go, can you highlight the ones that have different, that the place type is not consistent?
Yes, actually,
we were gonna. Oh, you're gonna do that again? My bad.
Well,
keep going.
I actually did. That's in the cover memo.
Okay.
I don't have the cover memo in front of me, so to remind myself, we do have 2 cases that are not listed in the 5 below. And I'll start off with that. That is 1606 and 1608 East Cornwallis, which would go from neighborhood services to apartment and townhouse neighborhood, and 4218 South Alston Avenue, that would go from general industrial to apartment and townhouse neighborhood. Both of those cases do not involve annexations. They're already wholly within the city, so they're not listed in the 5 that are highlighted for you. Okay. On this one, Durham Gateway at Briar Creek, there is no proposed change in the place type. For the Page Corners, a portion of the site is, yes, I'm trying to remember if it's a portion or the whole thing is currently suburban commercial on the place type map. It would move to mixed residential neighborhood should the zoning be approved. Okay. The next one is Courtyards at Oak Grove, which is over off of Doc Nichols Road, basically at the corner of Doc Nichols Road and Kennard Road. This would be going from residential rural to PDR 2.897. There is no change in the place type. And it would be for 67 townhouse and single-family residential units. The next one is 4802 Cheek Road. This is the first application we've gotten that would be outside of the urban growth boundary, but within Durham County. This would be a change in the place type from rural and agricultural reserve to mixed residential neighborhood and would allow 201 townhouses and single-family dwelling units. It is within the FJB, so it's not within the critical area watershed. It is within the suburban tier, though it is outside the urban growth boundary, but adjacent to it. And you can see that on the annexation map. This is the proposed site. This is all one parcel. This area here is within the urban growth boundary. You can see the urban growth boundary there. Okay, and finally, 3815 Wake Forest Highway. This would be going from a number of different zoning districts, CN, RS20, and RR to PDR 17.660. This is essentially across Wake Forest Highway from Oak Grove Elementary School. I believe it is, yeah, we would need to change. It has currently suburban commercial apartment and townhouse neighborhood and established residential on the site. It would all go to apartment and townhouse neighborhood should this be approved. And those are the 5 highlighted cases since we last presented to you in April. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Good morning. Go ahead, Mr. Shaker.
Sorry, I'm late. Okay, so you actually answered one of my questions, which was, so I think it's very significant that we're getting something outside of the urban growth boundary. Also, going back to that slide, it also seems that it's contiguous to a future growth area, which we have said is an area that needs, and you all can correct me, but is dependent on having necessary, is that an area that is given that designation because there is the need for more infrastructure there? Just to go over the definition.
Let's have sewer.
Okay, so it's even outside of the urban growth area and connected to something that is.
Yeah, and in my conversations with the applicant, this neighborhood here does have sewer, I believe. They at least have water, and so they would tie into the utilities down here for this development up here.
Okay. So I hope that we will look at this really carefully because I personally think it's important as we are just implementing this plan that we stick to it. I do want to note though, I would question about another one, which was it, the next one, Page Corner.
Mm-hmm.
Is that also outside the urban growth area?
No.
Okay, it isn't. Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, that's at Chin Page Road and Page Road. That's right near the county line, but it is not outside the urban growth
Okay,
boundary.
because I thought, well, this is a good example of what we do want to see.
Yeah, it's 100%
Yeah.
affordable for 60% AMI or less through LIHTC funding.
Yeah, so this was a good example. And high density,
Relatively high
Yeah.
density, yeah,
Mhm.
22 units to the acre.
right? Yeah, and amazingly all affordable as well, so.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to, I do want to mention something. I noticed there were the Cheek Road one that is not consistent. And then also the Wake Forest are both in the Falls Jordan Lake. Is that correct? Were there any other ones? I think
They're both in the FJB. I don't recall off the top of my head. Believe, yeah, the Wake Forest Highway one, I believe, is in the FJB, as well as Page Corners is not. Durham Gateway, I don't believe is.
Yeah, I think those were the only two.
I think so.
Oh.
Courtyards at Oak Grove
Oh,
would
yeah,
be in the
that's right.
FJB as well.
Okay, you're right, okay. I just want to mention that at the last meeting of the Upper Neuse River Basin Association, we talked about, and Ryan Smith could be a really good resource on this. Right now, the General Assembly is letting us use protection of existing soil, all these different measures. There's a whole manual that we have developed about how to really avoid kind of the turbidity issues that we're seeing in the Triassic Basin. Right now, we're only allowed to really impose that for pre-existing development. Okay, existing development. We are not allowed to actually enforce that for new development. And they're really very common sense practices around, reseeding, doing things to just basically keep the soil in place, which is something that can really help with, the particles getting into the water. So we started a conversation about really trying to work together with people. Obviously, this is a voluntary thing at this point, but it's things that don't cost a lot of money to do. They're just basic common sense practices. So we did have a discussion about trying to work together with partners. And again, I'm not the best person to talk about it technically, but so I would just say maybe you all could connect with Ryan about this, because evidently it is required for existing development, not new development. And, everyone's trying to come up with what are things that we can do that could really help. And this is what the staff from UNRBA have recommended.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thanks, Erin. Next up, we have Walton Small Area Plan Update with Carl.
Oops, excuse me.
Good morning.
Hold up for Chris.
Presentation in reverse. It's okay. All right. There we go. Okay. Do the little reverse sound. Okay, so thank you, everyone. My name is Carl Klosna. I'm the project manager for the Walltown Small Area Plan. So I'm here today to give an update on the plan, and specifically to talk about what we're calling the first chapter of the plan, which are policy guidance, specifically for the former Northgate Mall site. I'm going to give a little bit of background context on the site and then go through the policies. I've also invited representatives from Northwood, which are the property owners here, who will be able to talk a little bit about their reaction to the policies in a couple of minutes. So really today I'm here asking for feedback specifically about the policies. We're currently just on the tail end of an engagement phase that's been happening on these policies. So we've been getting feedback from community. We've heard from Northwood. We've heard from Duke also. So getting feedback from elected officials will really help us understand how we make revisions as we're moving forward. So former Northgate Mall site, just for some context, roughly 60-acre site. This is the boundary for it. The document itself sort of outlines this area specifically and mentions that the policies are specifically related to this area that's outlined in red here. So at the last meeting, I was asked to bring some sort of information about the transit opportunity area and a little bit of background about transit-oriented development in general. So this is a map of the place type map from the most recent comprehensive plan. So shown in purple here is the transit-oriented development, or sorry, the transit opportunity area, which is essentially transit-oriented development. A key idea behind this is what we called the 15-minute community concept in the comprehensive plan. So these are areas where we have dense, walkable, mixed-use development where there's a variety of uses that residents can have for their daily needs. So jobs, living opportunities, educational opportunities, access to recreation, healthcare, shopping opportunities, and things like that. And the key idea, as the sort of name implies, is that these are connected to strong transportation and transit corridors. So specifically for Northwood or Northgate here, we have route number 1 bus that's coming by along Broad Street with a 30-minute frequency right now. So just for a little bit of context outside of the area, shown in yellow here is the established residential place type. So this is sort of our standard urban and somewhat suburban tier residential uses. That parcel there that's a mix of green and blue is the Walltown Park. And so that's a mixture of the recreation and open space place type and the institutional place type, which is for the recreation center, basically. So I want to show a couple of theoretical examples that I've pulled from a couple of different areas. This was from the Go Triangle Transit-Oriented Development Guidebook, which was commissioned a number of years, not that long ago, a couple of years ago, around the light rail station. So I know there's, that is not happening. There's a lot of baggage around that, but I just want to focus specifically about the sort of design of this here. So this is an example. It's called the Gateway area. This is on the western portion of Durham County, right at the border of Orange County. I picked this example because there are some similarities between this and the Northgate site, most specifically that it's bounded on 2 sides by highways. So in general, what I kind of just want to focus on here is, so you see there's a clear sort of grid structure to it, and that's a basic idea and sort of foundational tenet around transit-oriented development. So you've got a variety of mixed-use buildings that have structured parking that are wrapped around it. That section where it says E there in the guidebook was called a pedestrian-oriented street that sort of serves as a view corridor, so a central area that has safe connections and safe crosswalks along it. And then in this case, they're sort of transitioning D down there in the bottom is transitioning to lower density uses. Whoop, my presentation just reset it, Phil. Chris, could you pull that back up for me? Thanks. Okay, there we go. So this is an example from Virginia. I know Councilmember Baker, you were very familiar with this. So this West End, previously the Landmark Mall, a very similar sized mall to the Northgate site. Also similar in that it was sort of a mid-century suburban style mall that included a Sears even, that had undergone a decline over recent years. So there's a lot of work that went into this. Specifically, what I want to highlight here is the height of the buildings. So you generally see buildings that are around 6 or 7 stories tall, mix of residential units on top with institutional and shopping and retail spaces on the first floor. So I want to talk a little bit specifically about why that is the case and why we're seeing a lot of that. So this is the idea of the 5/1, which is a building code. It's a sort of concept that comes from the North Carolina Building and Fire Code. You're seeing these all over the place. This is an example from South Roxborough Street in downtown. I picked this picture because you can kind of see in the corner there what's going on, where this is, so per building code, you can only have a maximum of 5 stories that are made out of timber, that are framing, that are combustible. And so what you're often seeing is this single concrete podium, they call it, on the first floor. That's the shell that is generally retail spaces. And then, 5 wooden stories above that, and it ends up being a 6 or 7 building, 6 or 7 story building. So this is significantly cheaper to build compared to steel and concrete and rebar and those sort of things. So because of that financial reality, you're seeing a lot of these 5/1s or much, much, much taller buildings like One City Center, which is at 27 stories. So there's a little bit of a missing middle range in terms of between those 5/1s and the larger buildings where it's easier to recoup the more expensive construction costs. So another consideration, I know the chair asked me sort of to talk about this international example. So this is the idea of double egress, 2 exits or 2 stairwells. So this is a figure here showing the maximum allowable building height for a single staircase in different parts of the world. So Italy, Germany, China, France, Sweden, Denmark, Israel, Spain, many, many places allow much, much taller buildings. In the United States, if you're a 3-story building or above, it requires 2 staircases. And I'm not an architect, so if we have some architects who could help me out a little bit, but my understanding generally is that there's because of this 2 egress requirement, you have 2 stairwells. Those are generally sort of framed in the middle of the building, and then you have a single hallway that's connecting them, and it kind of like a hotel. And this often leads to a sort of similar design where you have these parallel residential units that are on each side, and there's some complexities and challenges with that design. So there's been a lot of talk. These would be challenged, both 5/1 and the double egress would have to be changes in the North Carolina building code. But I just want to give a little bit of context about why we're seeing sort of structures that we're often seeing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I just have a quick question. This is really interesting. The previous slide there, where does something like the Van Allen building fit in that is not 26 stories, but it's, more, I don't know how many stories that is.
Yeah, that's
And it's
rebar,
not
right?
wood.
It's steel, ivory.
Right, it's
Yeah,
steel and it's a really nice building,
yeah,
but it's not 26 stories. So,
right, yeah.
I mean, we don't have a lot of those,
Right.
but I think that's an example of,
That's how the middle sort of happens, yeah.
Thank you for including
Yeah,
that.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
Wanted to add this for you.
Is that one of the things? So the other thing that I wanted to have an understanding around is mass timber framing, which is what, where we can get some height that gets us over the 5/1 big boxy things that people complain about.
Yeah,
I know that there have been some, I guess, allowances of those buildings in North Carolina now, or is that changed? And so I just was curious. I just see the UDO rewrite as an opportunity of some of it's our stuff and some of it's building code.
Yeah.
We're now going to be seeing triplexes and quads in the residential. So we're seeing some of the shifts that need to happen.
yeah,
So at some point, just within our legislative process and other places, where can we push and how can we push? Because I hear residents complain, and I think the part that they're missing is people build what they're allowed to build.
right.
And if we don't like it, then we have to change the rules about what we're allowed to build.
well, related to what you just said, isn't the American tobacco expansion going to use that?
Yes, but they had to go through a variance of sorts, I guess, to be allowed to do that instead of it's just allowed within the building code. And it would let us get to some higher, get away from this 5/1. Obviously, places like Chicago don't allow you to build that because of Great Fire, like they changed their whole building code. So you have to have metal framing. Like you're not going to see the stick framing that you see in other parts of the country. Go
So,
ahead. I'm sorry. I'm going to let Director Young talk.
okay.
So I just wanted to chime in and say that we're definitely going to be looking at a lot of these interrelated limitations as part of the UDO rewrite. We actually have a meeting coming up with our consultants and the inspections department to talk about some of these things. But I just want to caution that the building code, right, the whole purpose of it is safety, right? But it's also very complicated. There are a lot of interrelated things. It's not just about saying you only need one stairwell. There are like maximum travel distances within a building. And so if you get a building of a certain floor, like it's more complicated than that. I just want to make sure that people understand, like there's a lot of nuanced things and it may require a lot of changes. So I just wanted so we will need additional support to advocate for those changes.
Thank you. I couldn't respond because my mic was blue. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yes, I'm aware. And so just tell us where we may fail, but hopefully tell us where, because I know that there are other communities that are pushing on this as well. I think Seattle changed their code or was able to change their code, granted home rule state. But at the end of the day, designers design what they're allowed to build, what they're allowed to design. And if we want different design, if we want prettier things, we have to change the rules to not make our buildings, really big and massive and take up a whole city block, which is what we're seeing. And people are responding to that without really understanding the other side of there's a lot of rules. And we are overregulated in comparison to much of the world, ironically, because that's not how it is in other cases. Thank you. Commissioner Jacobs, did you have anything else?
No, I just say that when we get to that point, obviously where we would need the right language and all that, but that's something we can work on. Yep.
Thank you. I don't, if you want to keep going.
I'm gonna do it quick.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
You all
Commissioner
right?
Burns, go ahead.
So one of the points that they all brought up was nuance, and this is gonna sound really random, but help me land this plane. Let's just take like California. right? Like when California changes an emission law, the nation changes because California buys the most cars. So a lot of times when they can't get stuff through Congress, if California says, well, we're not going to allow any more cars to be purchased absent these emission laws, like Ford changes, Toyota changes. Randomly, I'm trying to juxtapose and make that transferable to this. There are builders that don't do stick frame. There are builders that don't do metal frame. And so are we seeing, like, as we're putting out bids and putting out options like this, do we kind of limit, again, I'm not on the developer side here, that's other people at this table, but do we limit ourselves when, well, not limit ourselves, the case that they made for California, like California doesn't do a lot of wood bills, hence the fire. Are we seeing that because of California cars, nation, Chicago wood, rest of the nation, are we seeing that some of the builders that we're asking to build say, you know what, we just can't do this because, not just because of regulation, hell, nobody builds this way in 40 other states, and so we don't. And I know this, I think they made a great point about the law, and I'm with them on that, like it's overregulated. But then these kind of other really regulated states, are we boxing in the builders as well? And maybe, Sarah, I don't know, is it making sense? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. We have tried really hard to make sure that we can't prescribe some
Right.
construction method or whatever, right?
Right.
But making sure that we align what we allow
Mm-hmm.
to encapsulate those other types of developments.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have seen, certainly like in downtown, when we lifted the cap on height,
Right.
we started getting taller buildings,
Right.
right? And so we do have some kind of skyscrapery buildings in downtown now as a result that are a different construction method. So I think it's us doing our part to make sure that the zoning regs are not a barrier to
Mhm.
those kind of things. And then really working with our building code officials to try and make some changes on the building code side. 'Cause I
No,
think
and-
that's what's really holding things back.
Right, and just so I'm not sending a shot or a dog whistle, because if I had something to say, I would. You said that this was cheaper. I kind of like this 5/1 model is cheaper. We have all these hub meetings and subcontractor meetings at the county. And, I'm usually sitting in the back and just kind of ear hustling and listening. And I'll see, like, I won't say the names. I heard like 5 people's like, oh, we can't do this. And I just kind of sat and listened. I was like, oh, we don't even build this. And I was like, what do you mean this? Because in my mind, I'm overly simplistic. It's an apartment. You build apartments. What you mean you don't build this kind of apartment? And so it was just really interesting to see. And then to hear this conversation, there are folks who are like, we don't even do this. So, okay, cool beans. That was all. Thank you, sir.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think there's like I said, I've got folks who are developers here, maybe have some thoughts when they're going to share in a minute. So I just want to go through the actual policies themselves, or at least the policy topics. So again, former Northgate Mall site. So the document is attachment A. I'm happy to pull it up if that's helpful, but I figured I would sort of talk big picture about the topics and the sort of main themes around the policies, and then I'm happy to talk specifically about any of the language in them. So the document is organized. It starts with what we're calling an objective, which is sort of an executive summary of the sort of thoughts and ideas and concerns that people have for the site. The document then sort of talks about how overall, this document, it's a synthesis of both existing comprehensive plan policies that have been pulled because they're related to this area, and then where appropriate, there is additional policy guidance that is specific to the Northgate site. So the first sort of policy topic in the document is the idea, the 15-minute community design. This is a sort of, it's a focus on the design. So things, major opportunity. There is a significant amount of surface parking on the site. That's an opportunity for transition to taller mixed-use buildings. The comprehensive plan talks specifically about sort of 2 flavors of transit-oriented areas or transit opportunity areas. And in staff's estimation, this Northgate site is of the larger regional-oriented type, and that's specifically because it's bounded by 85 to the north. So part of that TOA language was recognition that in some areas there are TOAs that are quite close and on all sides are surrounded by neighborhoods. So wanting to be sensitive to the transition of that I think is less of a concern, particularly because of that highway there. There's a policy that specifically discourages auto-oriented uses. This is captured in the transit opportunity areas, but just sort of reinforced. So things like car washes or gas stations that are purely automobile-based uses would be really detrimental to the pedestrian orientation that we're trying to move forward in this area. There's a policy in there that talks about sort of the importance of the grid pattern, which I showed some examples of, but also that there's a bit of a balance between that and also adaptively reusing some buildings and structures on the site. It's our understanding from conversations with the developer that there are a number of structures, one of the parking decks in particular, and significant portions of the mall that the hope is to reuse those. So since those are in place, you sort of need to figure your grid pattern around those. And then the last is sort of the idea of that this is talking about pretty significant change from what is existing on the site. So this development is going to need to happen in phases. I'll say specifically that staff has kind of already identified through conversations with the developers and just sort of review again that these policies talking about the development phases and also the sort of balance between the reuse of buildings and the grid pattern need to be strengthened a little bit in the policy document. So that's something that I know that we'll be focusing on for the next revision. So the next topic, I'm also happy to answer questions as we're going topic by topic, but I'll just go through. So the next one is affordable housing. This is relatively straightforward. So the transit opportunity areas in the place type map in the comprehensive plan recommend that 20% of the units be affordable at between 30 and 80% AMI, with half at 30 to 50%. The community organizing that's been going on for many years has landed on the number of 30, and staff thinks that's appropriate given the particular need for affordable housing in nearby neighborhoods, particularly Walltown, and a mix of housing units as well in there. So affordable retail, this was a strong theme through community organizing and through the engagement that we've done over the last couple of months. So intentionally including commercial and retail spaces for low income and BIPOC residents. We think functionally this could take the form of smaller retail spaces that are by definition a little bit more affordable. An affordable grocery option is one idea that's been very specifically requested by community, and we put in the plan. It's our understanding in conversations with the developers that this is an option that they're definitely pursuing. So a call for an affordable grocery option on the site. Community-centered spaces. So this is both indoor and outdoor spaces. The idea that there would be places that are accessible to people, that are publicly accessible, park space that's on site, and then incorporating civic uses, opportunities for education or opportunities for recreation, or just for people to sort of be in community together. There's a policy talking specifically about publicly accessible open space on the site and not wanting to see open space that is restricted. So basically, open spaces that are perhaps only available to people that are working at a nearby neighborhood. So wanting to see places that are accessible to the whole community. And this was a sort of continuation of the idea and a concern from residents that development would be exclusive, basically. One specific thing is a designated indoor community space. The idea of sort of perhaps a library branch. We've been talking with the county library folks about what options might be, but some sort of designated indoor community space that could be that the community has sort of the ability to program what would the use of that space would be. So that's an indoor and outdoor space. Transportation and connectivity is a pretty bread and butter thing. There's a lot of comprehensive plan guidance for this through the transit opportunity area already, but basically the sort of key ideas, looking for a robust internal pedestrian network that is safe, that is connected. Both specifically the Walltown Park, just on the other side of Guest Road, is an opportunity for a nice connectivity between a public park and what could be, a destination for a lot of people, but also within the space wanting to see walking trails and other things like that. Bicycle and pedestrian improvements on Guest and West Club and North Gregson, which are the roads that are sort of abounding the site. So that's what those policies focus on specifically. And last, we have environmental sustainability. So one sort of overarching theme. So the site right now is roughly 80% impervious surface. There was an assessment that was done in collaboration with a number of people looking at heat islands across the city. When you look at that map, like Northgate shows up like a red hot coal. It's a really hot area. So in general, wanted to see increases in tree canopy coverage, specifically with native plants, which is something we've seen proffered through the development that's guided by the landscape manual. Decreasing some of that impervious surface, incorporating sustainable development practices, adaptive reuse of buildings, solar panels, electric vehicle charging, green infrastructure, and things like that, and then remediating any contamination, particularly from the Sears Auto Center on the site. So that takes us to the end of the policies. I'm just going to say very quickly, so we're finishing up our phase of engagement where we've been sharing out these policies with residents. I think it was just a couple of days after the last meeting that we had both an in-person and a virtual open house where we had maps and posters of the policies for folks to come in and give us their thoughts and feedbacks. There's been an online and a paper survey that has been open and will be open through the end of this week. We've gotten about 100 survey responses so far. So I'll be sharing out a sort of detailed summary of what we're hearing from residents, demographics and things like that at the December JCCPC meeting. And our next step really based on feedback that we're hearing from the community, from key stakeholders and from elected officials like you all, is to do revisions to the policies. So my intent is to bring a revised version of the policies to you all at the November JCCPC meeting. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have about the policies or anything else. And then I'm going to let, like I said, I've got representatives of Northwood can talk. Maybe I should do that now, actually. Okay.
Morning, Chairman Caballero and members of the commission. My name is Sandy Spurgeon with Northwood, which owns the majority of the Northgate Mall. Thank you for providing me with an opportunity to participate in this process. I'd like to start out by saying that the draft policies echo the feedback that we have received from the community, many of which are incorporated into our current planning. Rather than try and push back or water down some of the more onerous policies, we've instead requested that some qualifying statements be added. Sorry, my phone turned off. That acknowledge that the small area plan is a guiding document that's intended to be intended to cover the long-term vision of an area versus cater to a specific development that's being built immediately. So to that end, we have suggested that things such as phased implementation occur, that adding incremental density over in time is important. The importance of incorporating a road network that respects the surrounding street network and appropriately ties into the fabric of the broader Walltown community. While eliminating all surface parking today, as an example, may not be possible, that careful consideration should be given in the planning process of the street grid and block sizes to allow for density to be added over time. And then finally, just adding concepts in that give some subjectivity to or objectivity to things such as sustainable practices. While incorporating those are paramount, we want to make sure that they're also financially feasible. We just want to put qualifying statements in that kind of reflect the fact that this is going to happen over time, that it's a large scale project. And we really, in doing this, tried to decouple what our plans for the property were and really participate in this process in really engaging with the community. And I think staff's done a good job reflecting that in this policy. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good morning.
Hey, this is Neil Ghosh, attorney with the Morningstar Law Group, and we've been working with Northwood on the Northgate site. So I just wanted to add a couple things to that. Just to put it out there, we don't really have a timeline on when we plan to submit our rezoning. We have been happy to engage in this process. I will say it's not been, we've obviously engaged with the community over years. So a lot of the feedback, as Sandy mentioned, a lot of the feedback that came out of the formal engagement sessions matches what we have heard over the years. So I would say it wasn't necessarily a surprise to us, but the process seems to put a lot of order, and I just facilitate conversations with the community about Northgate. So, it's no secret that we have presented a plan. So I think generally folks are aware of what it is, but we have not yet moved forward with the rezoning. I don't know when that will happen, but we are still planning to be continuously engage with this process and see how that shapes out. And then I guess aside from that, I will mention, the plan to the feedback that we've heard and the draft that we've seen, in our estimation, is actually the plan that we have proposed is very much consistent with those policies, or maybe a different way to phrase that is, it's not inconsistent, may not deliver the full vision, but it's not necessarily negating any of the long-term goals that we have seen expressed in the draft and through community engagement. So we think we're on the right track, and we're keeping our ears open and continue to be engaged in this process. So thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? No? Go ahead, Commissioner Jacobs. Or did you?
I was just gonna, while the applicant's up here, I was gonna ask a few questions.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering what would be your strategy around grocery? Because, I mean, we've heard this over and over again. We have tried at the county's 500 East Main Street project, which is under construction now. The goal has always been to have a grocery store on East Main Street. We allocated the space for it. We have not been able to find anyone who's interested in opening a grocery store there.
Well, off the record, but not off the record, obviously. We've been in advanced discussions with a large 150,000 square foot discount retailer.
Okay, fantastic. Similarly, see, now that the county's involved in the real estate business, we have our own experiences. Similarly with retail, we put in ground floor retail in admin 2. That space has been we have one person who we hope is going to open a restaurant, but it's been very difficult. So the idea of, and again, we are offering low, affordable rents. And so, I don't know what strategies you even have, because I'm looking at the request from the community around having affordable, low cost, commercial space. Just wondering what strategies you might have around that. We also now own a shopping center, Shops at Hope Valley. So again, just some of the experiences that we are having as the county in this area. I'm just wondering what strategies that you might have around that, and things like maybe having smaller spaces, which is one of the advantages that we have at the Shops at Hope Valley. We have some flexibility, but what are your thoughts about that?
Sure. We really see two main retail components at the project. One being kind of the regional anchored center surrounding the large retailer that I mentioned, and then an appropriately sized neighborhood center at the opposite end of the project. One thing I've always said, and I feel strongly about in retail, is it's an elastic equation. For it to be successful, it has to cater to the needs and the desires of the market it serves. So by default, if the community wants affordable retail is what's going to be successful. And just because it's affordable doesn't mean they can't pay high rents, right? I mean, if they're successful and do high volume sales, they can afford to pay the rents that would allow for you to reposition a center in the way that we envision it.
Okay, great. And then another question, are you looking at doing, I know the general idea is this is not downtown, but obviously along 85, it may be appropriate to go up higher there. I know when we looked at, and I really appreciate you looking at the Gateway project and going back to that plan, because when we were looking at the light rail, that's what we did, is we looked at, where was it appropriate to go higher, and things like along highways is. So would you look at that being an opportunity, and especially how do you make affordable housing work? I mean,
Two separate things, but yeah.
Well,
When we have looked at adding a higher density product today, we've had trouble making sense of it. So truthfully, the way we're thinking about the project is planning blocks that allow you to come and add those things over time, because we don't want to just sit there spinning our wheels for 10 years trying to get something to make economic sense. And it's no secret today, nothing works. I mean, anywhere. I mean, construction costs where they are, interest rates, it's going to change, and that's going to change quickly. But I do think over time there's an opportunity. And on affordable housing, we've spent a lot of time getting an education on it in the past year, and have been working with the developer out of Charlotte that we've been incredibly impressed with. And I had no idea how much I didn't know about it. Being in development for 25 years and just spending 6 months with these guys and understanding what the process looks like and the ability to add multiple projects, for example, how difficult that is given that North Carolina's #1 focus is geographic diversification. So putting 2 affordable housing sites next to each other, we feel like that would be disingenuous because the ability to actually execute that is very difficult.
Could I address that a little bit
Sure.
as well? So, yeah, one thing I want to talk about a little bit is the strategy as it relates to the delivery of affordable housing. There are, of course, many tools that people have tried to use to deliver affordable housing. In my estimation, whether it's 4% or 9%, the LIHTC tax credit program is probably the most effective. One of the strategies for getting affordable housing to work at this site is something you mentioned earlier, having a grocery store.
Yes.
Right? So that is going to help this site score better. Sandy just mentioned the geographic proximity. It's not itself an eliminating factor. It's not that you can't necessarily have 2 LIHTC projects next to each other, but it does make it more difficult on the scoring rubric. So the other part of that, though, one thing I just kind of want to touch on, you were talking about what about taller buildings and on the 85 side, how taller buildings don't necessarily make it easier for you to implement a LIHTC project. LIHTC projects tend to cap out at a certain number of units. And the most effective way to do them, and this is what you've seen in Durham primarily, is to have the LIHTC project as a standalone building or complex rather than being mixed into, a tower,
I mean,
so to
that's what we're
speak.
doing. The
with-
county's doing it.
Yep, yeah, but
Yeah.
and that's what you see more often, right? So it's kind of difficult. So I guess what I'm saying is it's not necessarily the case that taller buildings would make it easier to implement or deliver affordable housing on the site. The other thing that I'll just mention is based on the feedback that we had received, I don't know how much height really played into the conversation with the community. I don't know that there was any expressed desire to have, 20-story buildings or the inverse, but I do think that what we have always talked about with this iteration of the project is kind of, 6, 7-story type of building height, at max, but not what I would call like a tower or, 10 stories. I don't know that we've really envisioned that or expressed that to the community. So it's a little unclear, I guess, to me, what the community's expectations or desires are with respect to height.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for being with us. I'm grateful for the work that's been already done on this and the sensitivity and the engagement with the community. I do, however, want to put down a couple of markers that are important for me. Whether in office or out of office, what I will not participate in is selling, particularly the legacy residents of Walltown, the Bill of Dreams, or creating an overinflated image of what we can and cannot do. And I say that because the Walltown, when this conversation started about preserving Walltown, the Walltown that we wanted to preserve in large part isn't there anymore. And I said this at a last meeting. So a lot of the voices that are part of the community conversation are folk who have recent arrivals, 5 to 10 years to Walltown, a lot of those legacy residents. And when you look at the list of things that folk asked for, I chuckled to myself because, we said discourage auto use, but have EV stations, I guess, for the Teslas of the 30% AMI folk. So they can charge their Teslas at 30% AMI. And when you look at that together, and this is precisely what I was talking about the last time, the voices have changed. And the things we're trying to accomplish in the area could very much be serving folk who are welcome, of course. And I'm not, saying they shouldn't be there, but the conversation has morphed because the Walltown we were trying to save in many ways has already been dissipated. Secondly, I was one of the leading voices in opening Willard Street apartments. And one of the things we learned, and I'm not going to, one of the things we learned is we were excited about getting those units downtown. And we were talking about a grocery store before then, but we built it knowing that there was not a grocery store down there. There was a transit station. And part of the truth is some of those folk that live in Willard Street were having tough times. And I'm not going to pretend that lessons weren't learned. And I'm not going to go into another project and advocate or whatever, vote for it without making these things, without saying these things. The reason why a lot of our retail space is empty, although we're looking for a grocery store, and I'll say what the developer didn't say, is because in our system, governments don't open grocery stores in our country. We can't dictate to business owners. The market does. That's why our spaces are empty. And we can say all we want that we want a grocery store, but if the market does not make sense listen, you can open a barber shop, you can open a restaurant, you can open a beauty shop, and they go out of business every week. We hear about folk downtown, folk going out because the market forces, governments don't control that in our country. And I'm not going to say to the folk or pretend for the folk the legacy folk who live in those neighborhoods, in office or out of office, I'm not going to pretend that we can do that. And we just need, we need to say that. You guys didn't say it, but you were kind of hinting around it, so I'll just say it. That's why, because there are market forces involved and things that the government simply cannot control. So even as we move forward on this, and I think small area plans are powerful, but small area plans can be just as useful to rich, homogeneous folk as they can to low income folk of color as well. It's a tool, but it's a tool that can be used by a number of different constituencies. So as we move forward, I just want to put those markers out there that I understand that this wish list represents a number of voices. Electric charger stations, but no car washes. So folk who drive their hoopties who still use gas, don't come in our neighborhood to clean your car. But if you got a Tesla, you can charge it here. So I just want to put that out there. And as we move forward, and the community engagement, continuing community engagement is important. But I do just want to be very transparent about, I see the competing voices and I see the result of trying to preserve a neighborhood that is in many ways already changing. And we just need to be honest about that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns?
I want to follow. I'm happy that Mark made the statements that he made, and I kind of want to tie in something that, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton made, along with something that Commissioner Jacobs said. So for those of you who are listening, she asked that question in earnest, like, how did you all do it? How did you all do the grocery store? And I won't say what chains, but a lot of your grocery stores, even the smaller ones, they're looking for 10,000 a month in foot traffic, 25,000 a month in foot traffic. And I think what Mayor Pro Tem said, that was a very honest compliment. I mean, a very honest comment. We are trying with everything. I can safely say that even with our staff, our facility staff, they went and talked to folks in Southeast Raleigh who were trying to do something similar to what we were doing. Like, how did you get a grocery store? We sat down with folks. There are a lot of people, even on the MLK property that my colleague mentioned, the shopping center we mentioned. So many people were upset at us about the Kroger saying, well, it closed during COVID and you all didn't open it. It closed in 2018. It did not close during COVID. It closed in 2018. It is now a beautiful Board of Elections. We hope you all will frequent it this November. But I do want to point out, getting a grocery store is very difficult. So I just echo the sentiments of my colleagues. And then I go back to you all, because we can sit here and talk about hood and latex language. And you said it, you don't say the name, save yourself. But you all say that you're getting somebody. So I'm curious, are you all able to get this grocery store in, or retail marketplace in, on the on the chicken before the egg, that we are also building housing. And by virtue of the fact that there will be more people living here, we can now put a grocery store. RTP 2.0, 3.0 does not have a grocery store. I just want to be really clear about that. So I'm curious, you don't have to answer here, but I want to go back to what my colleague, that I would like to know how y'all did it. When I think about, you all have seen the community Walmarts that are just grocery stores. I don't know if you've never seen one in small towns like a St. Paul's or a Lumberton. There's nothing in it. It says Walmart, but it is simply a grocery store. If you go up to Norlina at the edge of Virginia, North Carolina, you will see Dollar Generals that have added major grocery store components. So people are getting really creative on how they do it. But that 10 to 15,000 foot traffic, and we can see and say, well, Whole Foods is downtown, and Food Line is downtown, and Safeway is downtown, and there's a Food Line that is on Fayetteville Street, but there's still this dense population going up downtown where it's needed. So whether you answer here or not, I'm with my colleague, but I do want to also echo the sentiments of my other colleague. It's really difficult for a Harris Teeter, for a Piggly Wick, for a Carly C's, if you cannot justify that foot traffic, especially with eggs being as high as they are. So I'm just thinking.
Do you want to answer that?
If I may,
Yep.
truthfully, we didn't do it. The regional access did, the traffic did.
To your point, it
There's-
was the market.
It's all market driven. And this particular retailer, this is a void for them. They don't have a location on the north side of Durham, and they've been looking for years. So they've leaned in pretty hard, and they've done a ton of demographic studies and are very, very confident that it works. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, no questions, just comments. First, I just want to say, fantastic work, Carl. I'm really, really impressed by the work that you guys have done in working closely with the neighborhood who has been doing their own work for many years now. And this is one way of adding more legitimacy to that and bringing it in and bringing all the actors to the table so that we can have this conversation, sit down with Northwood Raven, come out with a vision and ask the question, how do we achieve it? And can we do that collaboratively and working together? You know, when we look at 30% affordable housing on the site, that's a huge number. That's a huge number for a privately owned parcel. At that point, we need to put some skin in the game. How do we do that? What are the things that we need to do that? I think the policies the draft policies that you currently have are perfect. I think they're really, really good. I know you're putting in some refinements and making some edits, and I think I've trust in that process. I really liked the gateway example that you showed, and I think that's really important to show exactly what the desired outcome is. I also really appreciate the comments from the Northwood about the need to be flexible and evolve the built environment over time. This site, we've seen multiple proposals over the past several years. The first proposal that I'm aware of, I think was pretty close in terms of urban design, street pattern, but there were some issues with it. It didn't feed in to the context of the neighborhood, and that was one of the loudest things that came out of Walltown was, like, we have a retention wall up on our side. The streets, it doesn't weave into the pattern of the adjacent streets. The open space on the site is private open space versus public. So there were just some things that needed to be changed, but overall, you sort of had the mixed use. You had the housing on the site. I don't think there was any original proposal for affordable housing. And then this latest iteration, I think it's just a little jarring that it shows so much surface parking. And while I think that surface parking is not going to go away immediately, there needs to be some sort of gesture in writing that says, this is what it's going to look like today. This is going to look like in 5 years. And over time, we're going to build out that grid network to essentially build an extension of the city that surrounds it. And that it's going to be real. That's going to have civic uses and public uses and private uses, potentially grocery store, whatever the market may handle. But moving us towards the the Walltown community vision. So I think I'm very happy with the direction this is going in. The market is changing. We'll just have to keep an eye on that. The other thing that I think we need to explore on our side of things is what are the conversations we have around putting public skin in the game? What does that look like? And what kind of, we've already started having this conversation, but what kind of state enabling legislation do we need for land use land value capture tools like tax increment financing or other kinds of funding tools that can help to finance a project that is really great and really contributes to Durham, to Walltown, and to the greater region, because this is a regional site, a site of regional importance. So just want to say again, thank you, Carl, for the work. Appreciate the comments that you all had. I had a good call with Folger Pratt. I don't know if you'll know Folger Pratt, doing the Landmark Mall site. And we were talking through some of the realities and some of the things that we needed to do for next steps. And I know, Carl, you're in contact as well with the project manager on that site. So a lot of great work is being done. I just want to say to you all, to Northwood, we want to continue sitting down and talking through the vision, how we can achieve it, addressing some of the realities, but getting us closer to the outcome that the community wants.
Thank you. Anything else?
Let me make a final comment. Appreciate those comments, and the reality, starting with our original plan, acknowledge its challenges and all the things it didn't do from an urban planning standpoint and tying into the community. But putting that aside, it didn't work financially. It didn't. And so it's getting grounded in the realities. To your point, Landmark Mall got over $135 million of public financing up front, not performance-based TIF. I mean, it was a whole stack of different things, but a substantial amount of money to get in. Eastland Mall in Charlotte is a public-private partnership. The city bought the mall, then hired the master developer, and can't remember the number. It's not as big as Landmark, but it's big. And, I think, part of what our struggle has been is trying to acknowledge that this is a large parcel that wants to be built out properly over time. But if we start showing density on it and then get overlaid with 30% affordable housing versus without help from the city, it's going to sit there, and we want to see progress. So that was actually one of our feedback we gave to the city was we should follow the city's affordable housing policy, acknowledging that the community would like to see 30% there. However, in order to effectuate that, we may need to have participation from the city, because otherwise, if we get encumbered with those things, it's just going to sit there and we're not going to get it done.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the agenda and time, and I know the next item is, I'm assuming we're going to get more updates around this.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
staff will be working on revising the policies, and we'll bring you all a revised version of the policies at the December meeting.
You have like 30 seconds. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Commissioner Jacobs.
I know you asked for input about the policies.
Mhm.
I guess my concern, was reflected in other comments that were made, that we need to be careful about some of the policies that were stated around affordable housing,
Mhm.
affordable retail, things like that, because to me, they're more aspirational than actually possibly implementable.
Mhm.
And they're not, to Mayor Pro Tem's point, they're related to market forces. And I think it's wrong if we are misleading the community about what we can and cannot do. So that's the input I wanted to give you. And also about, I didn't see anything around environmental sustainability related to reuse of buildings. Was that policy pulled out? Because I didn't see that. And I know that we have talked about that.
Yeah, I think it's listed, adaptive reuse of buildings is listed as one of the things, but we can take a look at that and see if there's a way
Okay,
to strengthen
thank
that.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have Carla with Heritage Communities Program. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
My name is Carla Rosenberg with Durham Planning, and this is my colleague, Anna Christina Hoffman, with, she goes by AK. And we are here to present the Heritage Communities Program update. All right. So just to remind you that this is a program that we're developing to honor the historical communities that currently don't have or may not be eligible for or don't desire local or national register status. We want to make the distinction that this is a recognition and not a designation, so it wouldn't carry any regulations. It wouldn't preclude a community from also getting the local national register or the local designations. And in fact, it could serve as a stepping stone because that body of research that would be created from the recognition could be used for a future designation if the community desires it. And then we basically see this as a tool to quickly and proactively preserve the history of vulnerable communities before that history is lost. So some of the criteria that we have created for eligibility would be that there is a common historical identity in existence for the last 50 years. And 50 years is the standard age that the National Park Service uses to recognize historical resources. It would have cultural, social, political, economic, or architectural significance to the city or county. It has been or is currently tied to a specific mappable location, and that could be either a center point or just some vague boundaries. It wouldn't have to have specific boundary edges. And these criteria, they primarily differ from National Register and local historic criteria because they don't require that integrity of materials that would accompany the goal of preserving extant structures. So some of the expected program outcomes, I'll list each of these and then AK is going to present these in further depth about how they'll look. So we'd have the resolution of recognition. We'd have historical signage placed in the community, a story map webpage, and a library archive that's created.
All right, so resolution of recognition would be adopted by the City Council or Board of County Commissioners based on jurisdiction. And it would establish a heritage community without further regulations. And then we are interested in installing historical signage in the neighborhoods. So these would be two-sided interpretive signs. An example would be the one viewed there. These are estimated to be about $2,500. The content would likely be designed in-house, and the sign, it would be located near a community center point or a meaningful location because these would not have exact boundaries, these heritage communities. So we would like to find a center point in the community to install the sign. And then we are interested in doing a story map webpage. So this would be an interactive historical narrative with text and images. And this would be linked to the planning department's website. And then, yeah. And then here will be an example. Oh, sorry.
So this was created by Wake Forest, a group in Wake Forest to recognize the Northeast community there. And you can see that there's a lot of interactive functions to it. So you have these text blocks that scroll up and down. You can include photos that overlay over maps. You can create shapes on the maps to show where buildings once stood. And there are also some fun, let's see, you can even include documents. And then there are some fun features of like moving overlay sandboard maps on existing aerials and just see how You should be able to show, it is, okay, past and present via these different features. And so our GIS department would assist us with creating this in-house.
And then the library archive, the director of the North Carolina collections at the Durham County Library has agreed to incorporate data collected for each heritage community into their own holdings or into its own holdings. And then there would be digital and physical data storage and web exhibits as well. I don't know if that's linked.
Yeah. So, yeah, we do have some examples of some Durham County Library's web exhibits, and there are examples online of the web exhibits that Durham County Library has created, which there would be the potential to develop exhibits about these communities in the future. So if you have any questions, let us know. Our next step really would be putting out the solicitation for applications and hope to get started this fall.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all so much for this. Just no question, just a commendation. This is more than just nostalgia or kind of, romanticizing areas. This really is a way to draw pilgrims to Durham. There are so many places in our city. I travel around the country. Sweet Auburn in Atlanta, Strivers Row in Harlem. There are so many places. People make plans to go see these places, and there are so many places in Durham that should be at that level. Folks should be coming here to see them, and we should be, I'll say, monetizing it for the entire city, monetizing it from a tourism point of view and visit, but also just preserving so many sacred spaces and sacred stories in our city. So I'm really excited about this work. Thank you for it, and I look forward to it fully taking a shape in our city and so many areas in our city getting the due that they deserve, and hopefully the country will come and appreciate them as well. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank
Go ahead,
you.
Director Young, and then Commissioner Jacobs.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify real quickly that I know we showed like a estimated cost of the signage, and just want to make everyone aware that that is not a burden on the community. That's something we would build into our budget and we would provide. We just wanted to daylight, like there will be an additional cost that we're going to be working through. So it may limit like how many we can do a year or whatnot. We'll work through all those details, but I just want to make everyone, I didn't want anyone leaving with the idea that that was a financial burden on any community.
Thank you. And then just really quickly, are y'all going to be working, once we get this kind of going, back with like Discover Durham or Durham Next on the tourism side? To Mayor Pro Tem's point, how do we incorporate that when folks come visit Durham? And then obviously Durham Museum of History, so that we can connect it back. I know that they do a lot of work in our public schools. So just naming those and wondering, how, are we thinking about how do we make those connections back to those entities?
Absolutely, yeah. We will add that to topics to discuss when we have them established, a community established.
Thank you. Commissioner Byrne? Okay. Commissioner Jacobs?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think this is really important and very exciting. I was wondering, when you talk about, what a community has to do, and you talk about demonstrating that this is something that should be, acknowledged, preserved. I'm just wondering, what are you thinking about in terms of what that means to demonstrate? And I'm going back to this because I'm thinking about things that we do now, like the Durham Open Space and Trails Matching Grant Program, and some of the things that we've learned about the capacity that different communities have. And to Mayor Pro Tem's point, there are some neighborhoods where some of those original folks, they're not there anymore. So I'm just wondering what is that going to mean? What are some of your thoughts about what that means to demonstrate?
Right. So we're not requiring, documents and, hard proof with the application. That will be our job once it has been, stated or claimed in the application
Yeah.
to do that. So really, it's basically a statement from the applicant as to why they believe it's significant. That's what we're requiring.
Okay.
And I think also it's three additional sort of petitioners to sign on, so that we have more names of
Yeah.
more contacts in the community to be able to glean that information that would make the case.
Okay, great. And then I was going to raise the same issue that City Councilman Vera Caballero raised about partnerships. I was also thinking about, the NCCU archives and also the Duke Center for Documentary Studies. To me, this could be a lot of work for you all.
Yes.
And thinking how we do pull in other partners to
Yes.
help work on this.
And we've already started making friends. North Carolina Archives came and did a presentation. We had a CLG training just a couple of weeks ago and had oral historians come and show us how to conduct oral histories. And so we are making those connections and looking to get some help on the ground in collecting the data.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Bo with a pretty long presentation on 60 minutes.
I'm a little clear. Yeah, probably. All right. Bo Dobrinsky, Planning Department. Here to give you an update on the Unified Development Ordinance project. You'll probably see a lot of me and this project over the next year and a half. Specifically today, we're going to be going over the proposed zoning districts as provided by Code Studio with some input from staff. Today, really want some feedback on sort of consistency with the adopted place types. There's a couple issues I'll be asking for some direction on, and we'll get to those in a few slides. Feel free to ask any questions as we go. I know we're somewhat limited on time, and this is pretty intense, but definitely I want to be able to, I want you to have a full understanding of what we're talking about. So this first district here, the residential preserve, this is essentially the RR zoning district outside the urban growth boundary, 3 acre minimum. So think large lot, single family, or agriculture. Sorry, so we're coordinating. For the RB, this is residential rural. So think RR, RS20, large lots, limited agriculture, outside the UGB, but smaller size were also included. So this is, again, think just typical suburban or rural development.
On the previous slide also, is that outside the urban
Correct.
growth boundary? So both of these would be outside urban growth boundary?
Correct. One is larger parcels, probably agriculture, the conservation or preservation areas, and this is more just outside the urban growth boundary, 3 acre-ish.
Have we done any kind of analysis on percentage of land that is?
We have not, but that is obviously we can provide that. We can break that down.
Okay, because I think that will be helpful for us to make some decisions.
Sure.
Like how much of the total land is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I mean, it's mapped, so we can provide that to you. RC, this is a zoning district specifically for manufactured homes. This was an action item coming from the comprehensive plan specifically to protect our existing manufactured home communities. You all may be familiar with, keeping this use in the zoning district will preserve it and not allow the purchase of land and redevelopment. Any questions about the standards as we go through, please stop. I'll get a little more detail in the next district. So. Cool. All right, this district is the residential district. As we've talked about extensively, one of the focuses for this new UDO is to consolidate a lot of our districts. And so the RD ends up, it includes our RU5, our RU52, RS8, RS10, a large percentage of our RS20. These are all areas within the urban growth boundary. You'll see that the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. That is what we have today in RE5 or RE52. So in some instances, this could be a fairly significant decrease in the minimum lot size. Just give you time to make sure you take a look. This is the slide where I'll talk a little bit about the two issues that were discussed in the memo where we'd really like some feedback from you. The first being that we are proposing the reason, as we said before, we're proposing the rezoning of all parcels in the county. And we will be rezoning all of the PDRs. We're proposing the rezoning of the PDRs to the RD. As we looked at this, and there was a separate place type designating these planned developments, but as we looked, regardless of how they were approved, it was an existing neighborhood, right? It was existing residential. And so rather than separate the potential for additional change or additional units out from the PDR, we thought it was made more sense, both in terms of how it was developed and in terms of the way that it looked or felt as a community to treat it all the same for this zoning purpose. And so what we'd really like is just some feedback from you all about how you feel. Just to clarify some of the questions that have come up, we will, the open space that was associated with those PDRs, that will go to the Park Zoning District, which we'll see later on. And then if there was a townhome that was changed to the RX3, which we'll also talk about, and if it was an apartment, it went to RX5, which is subsequent. So it was single family. We're proposing it as RD.
I have some, do you want us to ask questions throughout or just?
I would prefer that, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, versus at the end?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Wait. Because that sounds terrifying. No. Good. I was like, what is that sound and what is happening? Okay. So just, so this is for, I'm just trying to get some clarity. This is for existing, what's already on the ground? Is this for any potential, what are the parameters here?
This is what's already on the ground for sure. Much of the urban growth boundary, much of the existing residential development. This is also going to be on developed land as well. When we talked about how one of the goals and focuses of the UDO to encourage more by right development that provides but also provides the other concerns that we've got in the community, which we'll talk about as well. And so yes, this would be we expect this to be less rezonings, less PDRs coming to you, and more development in RD development as it's done.
And then I guess my question is, so again, it would be helpful to see what parts of the city we're talking about, because I'm having in my mind, I'm like, no, I want more than a house and an ADU. So that's where I'm kind of stuck. I'm like, well, isn't this not what we want? Which is why I was asking previously. I'm like, okay, that's outside the urban growth boundary. That makes a little bit more sense. Like you're tying it to a place type. At the end of the day, we need to see pretty radically different land use practices than what we're even seeing currently. And I know that residents don't like to hear that, but that's just the truth of the matter. And to Mayor Pro Tem's point earlier around the small area plan, part of our job is to be transparent and truthful with residents. So I think at some point, understanding where this is, and then in comparison to what other communities have done. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Well,
Yeah.
Heard. We'll keep going.
Thank you.
All right.
Got it. Yeah, I agree. It's kind of hard to think about this conceptually. I know that these are tied to the place. This is tied to the place type. It's unique and very challenging way of doing this, but I think a good way of doing this in theory. So I think, without that information, without more information, I guess I would just speak a little bit more philosophically, is that we do need a radical transformation of the built environment. And also that process of transforming the built environment needs to be managed so that we're not just creating rules that will have unintended consequences of kicking people out and gentrifying neighborhoods. And so that map, I think, will be useful for us to be able to think through that and to get some analysis from the planning department about how you think the impacts might affect existing communities. I also wanted to ask, because the memo had something about opting in.
Yeah.
And I didn't see that. Maybe I just missed it, but maybe you could speak to that real briefly.
Yeah, Councilmember Baker. So the subsequent slides will show this. Really, I think the significant change I just want to touch on here with the slide, this is the base RD district, which is going to be the majority of the single family. Well, there's really no longer a single family, but the majority of our South residential. The stark difference, of course, going all the way down to the 5,000 square foot, which is what we've gotten the majority of our urban tier. There are the sort of the second topic that I really want to get some feedback on from you all is the opt-in options that you referred to, and I'll show you here. So this is loosely based on the expanding housing choice small lot option. It's not limited to the subdivision lots. I mean, it could be for a rental approach. But in this instance, an applicant or developer would choose to provide more compact units. We've got 1,100 square foot here because this is what was in your agenda pack. We've actually modified that to 1,200 to align with the existing code for the small lots. But you'll see here the density goes way up, and you can have 1 unit per 1,250. You can have essentially anything that's in a residential code. And so in this instance, if they commit to the smaller units, they've got much more flexibility in terms of layout, setbacks, and unit count. There's also, because this is an optional approach, we are proposing some design standards on these developments that have the residential code. You'll see that there in terms of the active depth. In terms of the active depth, the ground story, essentially just some limitations on providing garages or storage along the street face, the primary street face.
Go ahead, Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, I'll just say the opt-in concept, I think that is so crucial. I think that is really, really important. So I'm really happy that, and I like, making it an opt-in concept means we can place some additional, standards to it, right? So like the design stuff, I think in the memo, and I don't have it in front of me, mentioned potentially some affordable restrictions or something like that. I think that is really, really important. I want to sit with this a little bit. I'd be more interested in something like a quadruplex rather than like 4 additional single family units and increasing the impermeable surface area, but
that's permitted.
I'm sorry?
That would be permitted, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
These are just various examples.
Okay. Yeah, I want to say this a little bit, but in concept, I really like the opt-in option.
So I just want to thank you, Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem. No, okay, so what is actually going to be by right then? That's what I'm trying to get at.
The 5,000 square foot minimum.
This right here, this opt-in is not by right. Then we would add
It would be by right.
But only if you opt into
But
the
only if you
standards.
opted into the standard.
So what I want to understand, and Bo was with us in Minneapolis, and there was a very illuminating conversation there. Their rents have been stable for 5 years. And the reason that their rents have been stable for 5 years is because I'm going to be a little crass, they've built a crap ton of units. That's what they've done. It has been supply. They've had they landed on 8% for inclusionary zoning, something that we're not allowed to do, but you see communities that are doing 20 and 25%. It was a very helpful conversation. And so I want to really understand what we're doing on the supply side. And I think that we have some great examples in Minneapolis and Austin. They're just building a ton of units and they are getting out of the way of the market. And I know for some of us who have, and I will own, challenges around capitalism and profitability and housing, that is a hard thing to hear. It is counter what you believe. It is counter what your values tell you to believe, right? But at some point you have to, either we're trusting the thing, we're not trusting the thing. So I really want us to dig in this moment on the UDO rewrite. And if we have to have some uncomfortable conversations as a community, then that is not staff's job to do. That is our job to do as electeds. So I appreciate this, but I want to really get clarity and real deep understanding of I appreciate the opt-in. I'm not saying no, but I want to understand what the consequences of something like that is, because by right is by right. It's not give us all this stuff and then it's by right. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jacobs.
Yes, yeah, just to add to what has been said, I was kind of struggling with this, trying to make a comparison to what exists now. So for instance, 5,000 square feet, is that like an eighth of an acre? Is that what it is?
Yeah. And
Yeah. So, okay, around an eighth. And I'm just trying to understand, again, in our current fabric, what is because trying to understand the comparison to what exists now and how this could help actually, create more density. And also the other one slide that you looked at, the second one is, I was trying to understand where would tiny homes fit into what, because I did look through all the different, through what's in the PowerPoint, and I wasn't sure where would something like a tiny home community fit in.
so there's no regulation on there's no minimum size for a home. So it could be as small or as tiny as possible. A lot of the times when we talk about tiny homes, they're referring to vehicles. And so, alternative, whether it be RVs or something similar. In this instance, obviously you could, as small as a building code would allow.
So I see here it's
It would
800 square feet. It says for massing, unit footprint, 800. That's the
That's a maximum number.
Oh, the maximum. Okay, so there's no minimum. So this could work for a tiny home then.
Of course, yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
and you could put tiny homes elsewhere as well. You probably wouldn't, but this is where that would go. Same thing with the sort of cottage neighborhood. We'll say that obviously the maximum or the compact in terms of limiting the size. Of course, we're hoping to impact pricing in some manner, and obviously increased units. Chair Caballero, in terms of the starting, we've got a proposed map on the website. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end in terms of how to treat that. I will say that there's much of the city, much of the land that's RS20 going to 5,000 is, the little bit of engagement we've done. We have heard that was a stark change, the two times that we've shown this PowerPoint elsewhere. The third option I really want to talk about, I'm sure that you're all interested in, is a third option within this same zoning district. So also by right development, where if you provide a percentage of affordable units, your density climbs, as well as other flexibility. And so this would be by right. So in practice, rather than a development coming for a rezoning from you all and potentially proffering affordable housing as a component, in this instance, they would commit to it as a part of a by right development. Little clear, consistent, transparent for the applicant themselves. And then they would obtain the densities that they may desire.
I have a question on that. Would we, for those who opt in, would we also put them on a fast track? Could we also put them on a fast track, like you're on your own timeline, like you get put to the front of the line?
If I understand your question, we're already expediting the reviews for any development that is providing a particular percentage of affordable units. I don't think that we would change that. That's just a process thing that staff has been doing across the city. We would probably continue. Obviously, that would depend on the volume of submittal, but yes.
I guess what would be helpful then is to have an analysis from staff about what the timeline is. If you're already expediting those cases, what is the current timeline on those cases? So that we appreciate that staff's doing that, and then that becomes a question on our end around, do we need to put more capacity in the department to get y'all to approve things quicker, especially if there's affordability associated with it?
Yeah.
We need to incentivize affordability as much as possible. And what we've heard from the development community is timeline and predictability. So I think that you're getting to the predictability piece of this, but the timeline piece is, I think, the other part that we really need to get right. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Bo, for taking us through this. Would this opt-in with respect to the affordable units, would it be more muscular than our existing density bonus? One, and two, would we be, without telegraphing also that there's going to be city subsidy involved, would we be telegraphing for folk to go after LIHTC kind of projects that we might be interested in on other things as a city, if it's on order, if that makes sense?
Great question, Mayor Pro Tem. The current affordable housing density bonus is set at 15%, so 15% of your units. We've had minimal applicants for that. And honestly, when we look at the numbers, they're somewhat inflated by LIHTC projects that are 100%. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's, that isn't the same situation where you have a mix of housing prices in one development. And so in lieu of rezonings, they've used the net density bonus. This, of course, we have not proposed a specific percentage in this, and it's certainly part of the feedback, part of the conversation. But we would imagine this to be, or hopefully, certainly the intent is that it would be used much more often than the density bonus. Also, we've got a few other incentives in the current code with height. We used to not require parking. This will have a few more incentives as well throughout the code.
It's helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Chair Caballero, I just wanted to maybe add some context. So currently for by right development, if you submit an application, the review timeframe is 30 days each submittal. For affordable projects, we're currently committing to 10 business days. So that's what we're able to do today. Obviously, the other advantage in terms of predictability, there's also a year to 18 months of public hearings that would be removed as well.
So that's for things that require site plans, though, because a lot of this might be able to, particularly on an infill scale, would not require a site plan. So then building permit review is 5 days?
Yep.
That's excellent. And we just need to broadcast that really, really loudly. Commissioner Jacobs.
And again, looking at this, I guess I don't want to get too tied up in the pictures, but would something like this be, a quadplex or, okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important that there are even more pictures or, so that people understand what are all the different possibilities that could be ways to use this. The people understand. I mean, I love the visuals, especially the way it's organized. I mean, I think it's a lot more understandable and straightforward, the way this is structured, but at the same time, the drawback of pictures is you can think it's only what's in the picture, you know what I'm saying? And if this is also going to be for the general public, yeah.
That's a really great point, Mr. Jacobs. Just to clarify, we had our first engagement session last night, and we have a much more customer-friendly, resident-friendly presentation in terms of picture, a little more pictures, more examples. We're showing this is the actual code. This is what the ordinance will look like. So it's a little more technical. Given the audience here, I thought it was more appropriate to really look at the nuts and bolts of it. But yes, we recognize that communicating to the public will, that's a really good point.
So we still are planning to have some user-friendly guides at the end of this that could contain, we can't predict every single possible iteration of how someone might use the code, but I think to your point, we could have in those guides some other examples of different ways that it could be applied.
Yeah, one last thing. I do just want to come back to what are our most vulnerable neighborhoods and the neighborhoods that are undergoing gentrification displacement most rapidly, and how will this impact them? And I just want us to special lens towards that and make sure that we're paying attention.
Any other questions, comments on RD? Just to, as you'll obviously see a map fairly soon. It's much of it's much of the city residential areas. Moving on to residential mixed use. Got the RX3. So these are essentially the zoning district apartments with some limited commercial at the ground level. Think sort of our RUM, our existing RUM, existing RSM. You'll see here as a part of this district, because we'll get a little more prescriptive in terms of the appearance of the building, in terms of the active depth, ground story height, required glazing. And just where it says RX3, you'll see a subsequent district RX5, associate those numbers with the height that is permitted. That is, of course, and here just showing on RX5, you'll see under massing that they may also elect for a compact option, affordable option. And so they would be incentivized to provide that same situation as RD. You'll see that because it's an apartment and not a detached structure, in many instances that the compact size is smaller. And then of course, the affordable, the height is unlimited.
Go ahead, Councilmember Baker.
So just looking at RX3, RX5, RX8, it looks like the main difference is in massing in the height.
That's correct.
So they're all pretty much the same. It's just as you go up, you need to provide less affordable units. Because they're all unlimited if you provide affordable units.
Correct. All unlimited if you provide the affordable units, and the no longer regulating density. Really just think about the form and what height building is appropriate in what district.
So I guess there are a couple other changes, but it seems like a big one is that you can go up higher without providing affordable units in like RX8. RX3, you can still go up unlimited, but you have to provide affordable units.
Councilmember Baker, when you say higher than what? I don't understand the question.
So under massing, height, affordable, unlimited.
Mhm.
So under RX3, RX5, and RX8,
Mhm.
it is all unlimited.
Correct. Yeah, and of course, that's, looking for feedback on that. We heard from the community with comprehensive plan that we need housing and we need affordable housing, and this is having had the density bonus that we currently have in place for many, many years. I think our hope is to be able to calculate affordable option so that it is used quite often and liberally.
Agreed.
But of course, there's an ultimate maximum height, that's reasonable as well.
No, I agree with that. It's just, they're all unlimited. So all of them, you can go up as high as you want to if you provide some amount of affordable units. It's just that RX8, you can go up higher without providing affordable units. And RX3, if you go up higher, you have to provide more affordable units.
That's correct.
Director, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of clarify to make sure that everyone understands what Councilmember Baker is saying is that if you want to build a 5-story building in RX3, you're going to need to do affordable units. But if you rezone to RX5, then you could do that by right, right? And so I think the difference there, and this is a really good feedback, and this is something that we have struggled with a consultant, like, how much, where do we want to set the bar? And so I think this is a good topic for us to go back and talk with them about whether or not these should all be collapsed into one RX. And then just, whatever, if it's 3, is your base height, and, you move up from there. So I think you brought up a really good point.
Yeah, thank you. And that would be my preference. Make it, everything is by right? And RX3, then you can go up as high as you want to, but you're going to have to show some affordable units in there.
Yeah, we
to take into consideration.
That's helpful. We have some existing districts like RC that allow great density, great height. And so in some instances, that's converted over to RX8, for example.
Sure,
so,
yeah. And then there's...
So that's the...
Right,
That's the conversation we have to have.
And you don't want to have a bunch of non-conforming after the rezoning, so. Yeah.
Oh, and the other thing we really want to have is a lot of small apartments instances where we do need that density to Chair Caballero's point.
Again, can you share maps of where these?
Yeah.
And then I think, potentially collapsing these into one makes sense. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll have to look at, certainly the issue of nonconformities is one that we need to look at carefully. And also looking at, I know there was some logic in terms of mapping to the place type that we'll need to go back and look at.
There was a lot of ifs and ands with the mapping logic. And then I guess I'm somewhat repeating myself, but depending on that affordable percentage and sort of the take on that, it would be a significant downzoning in a lot of instances. And so which is not what we're generally trying to do. Obviously, you see, we're trying to provide housing throughout the entire community. So,
Commissioner Jacobs.
I would just say, this is then same thing with the commercial mixed use 3, 5, and 8. It's the same issue.
it is the same issue. The big difference here, of course, is the existing zonings and often for the CX. So just to back up a little bit, this is similar to the RX, only a lot of these are existing commercial districts being converted to this CX mixed use that would allow the mixed uses. The difference again, the 3, 5, 8 is associated with height. In terms of the way that's mapped, that's based on a lot of times the size of the existing. And just a little context, we have a lot of shopping centers that are big surface parking lots. And so we probably, we'd love to see those redeveloped and a great opportunity to provide housing. We also have some small commercial areas where it works to potentially provide a mix of both residential and commercial. So similar here in terms of the design requirements. The massing is a similar situation, and I don't know if consolidation here makes as much sense. I think that would be my question or follow-up question to I guess your last comment on the RX.
Yeah, I think the thinking about the fact that we have an existing city and we can't just create perfect zoning for a theoretical future city, and we don't want to create a bunch of non-conforming structures. I mean, that's the reality of it. So, you know, and I've come back to this a lot in the projects that I've worked on, is we want to make it as simple as possible. And we have a lot of existing buildings that were built over decades. And so we need zones that do fit the existing buildings and the existing patterns. So I guess I would just say, you know, keeping an eye toward future development. You know, I think in concept, the CX3 with unlimited height, but we are looking to incentivize through density bonus by right affordable units is good. And then going from there, recognizing the reality of the existing built environment, that there are buildings at 5 stories that don't have affordable units, and those would need to fit within like a CX5.
And also just one, many of the TOA place type is this mixed use district. It varies depending on the specific TOA in terms of, 3, 5, or 8, but
Commissioner Jacob.
I think getting back to Councilmember Caballero's point, we do need to look at what is the future place type map for the areas, because I think about Hillsborough Road, for example. Actually, I'd like to see some very tall, mixed commercial along there and not be limited by what is there now. So I think we really have to, or whether it's a transit oriented area. So I think that, we're going to go through a period of transition. It's like the Miami Page, rezoning, I think that it's really important that we put this into context of what we are striving to get to also, right?
Yeah, these are all unlimited height already. So it's good.
I'm sure you're taking great notes, and y'all are going to come back to us with some great clarity on what we're supposed to really be pushing for. Thank you.
awesome. CX20, this is the downtown core. All right. Mixed use, you'll see 20 is your base. Obviously, similar to the other districts, you may go higher, either through the compact or the affordable.
Thank you. And so to the previous thing, are there other, and to what Commissioner Jacobs is saying, are there other areas in the city that we do need to think about, not just having everything downtown, thinking about transit opportunity, thinking about where it makes sense to have a lot of density?
So there are areas outside, of course, that have the CX8, which is, 8's fairly intense, and then of course unlimited if you provide one of those options. If there are more locations where we think the CX20 is obviously the type of feedback we're looking for. And to Commissioner Jacobs' point, there's also some areas currently being shown downtown that are CX5. And for example, that is essentially a down zoning because it's holding it at 5 unless you provide the affordable or and so I'll say again, it really is going to if we don't calculate those options with the compact and the affordable in a way that it is used, then we are going to be limiting the height in those areas. And so we really got to make sure that that's the right calculation. All right, thank you. All right, a little less complicated, I believe. So the commercial neighborhood zoning district, this will, where are we at? Neighborhood service uses, smaller footprints, neighborhood focused uses, convenience stores, coffee shops, barber shops, et cetera. Small footprints, drive-throughs required to be to the rear. Commercial general, substantially similar to a similarly named district that we have today. They're just your typical general commercial, no limitations on the drive-throughs, for example, and you don't have the same limit on the size of the building. This is currently mapped. This is not mapped on our largest, most intense commercial districts. That is reserved for the commercial heavy. These are large commercial buildings, a lot of light industrial, more suburban development. You know, in this instance, think, you know, our most intense uses, auto-focused, auto body shops, repair shops. This is a long presentation. Any questions? Great. Industrial mixed use. So this is a little bit new. This is currently being mapped at some of our existing smaller industrial sites. The idea that there is opportunity there for some very light industrial uses that could also have residential component. Fairly similar to some of the districts we've already gone over. Industrial heavy. I think we all have an understanding of the types of uses that would be permitted here, and the corresponding employment district place type.
I have a question about industrial heavy.
Yep.
So, because now we have LI, right? And we have industrial heavy, but it's like not a ton left of our land. I just want to make sure that we're not gonna increase, right? Like, that we understand that there's some places that are doing this, but this is not in light industrial. It's not people building, you know, small manufacturing that doesn't have the same environmental impact. Okay, so this is just because we have some and we have to allow it, otherwise it creates a problem, but we're not expanding the percentage of what's allowed.
Resource extraction.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, is your mic on? Ah, thank you.
This is more fun anyway. Am I on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds like it. All right.
If you want it.
I don't. Sorry about that. All right. The innovation urban. Yeah, this is think the SRPC or the RTP hub where in a more dense campus type environment for an employment district. Innovation campus. This is a larger, more traditional employment district. Five-story maximum. You'll see slightly smaller setbacks or shorter setbacks than what we've got in our current comparable districts. The civic use district to go along with the corresponding place type. These, of course, are for buildings like we are in today, community institutions, government buildings, schools, medical facilities.
I had a quick question about this. Why is there no requirement for any amenity space for this? Because when I think about this type of space, I feel like this is appropriate to have some type of public space associated with it.
That's a really great comment, Commissioner. I think that the thought process may have just been that for these types of uses, it may be provided, it may be a given, but I think that's really that's well heard, or that's well taken.
Okay, yeah, I'm thinking about like even the front of our county building, we've got these two tiny little pocket sitting areas in front of the building. We just came from Minneapolis and St. Paul and saw how they really incorporate really nice parks and public spaces everywhere, especially around their government buildings and things. So yeah, thanks.
Go ahead,
Just,
Councilmember
just
Baker.
off the back of that, and there will be, this is just the districts. There also are going to be development standards for a variety of different things, right? From open space to block length and those kinds of things that we're not seeing here. Is that right?
That's correct, Councilman Baker. There is, the next module will be development standards that apply to all districts. And obviously the percentages on those requirements may vary based on the district or the use. Also, one thing that you're not being provided today that Code Studio is going to be delivering soon are limited use standards that will go along with the permitted use table that is in your packet. The limited use standards, of course, may also show situations where the use is allowed. However, it must provide additional buffering, additional, I've been, as we talked about this with community members, currently we've got some examples, we have, daycares, it talks about outdoor play area. That's a limited use standard that we have in our current code, things of that nature. So that'll be also accompanying this. Conservation district, we've got the multiple open space districts. This is the more restrictive one. Very minimal buildings, very minimal development at all. This is for areas to be conserved. And then, of course, the park district. This is where more amenitized open space, and then obviously park facilities.
Go ahead, Councilmember Baker.
So on conservation, it looks like the minimum lot size is 2 acres, and then residential reserve, it's actually 3 acres. It's almost like that one is more restrictive than the conservation.
Scott, do you know, does that correspond with mapping logic for that? Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Just it's more restrictive in use and what you can do on it.
Okay.
Which is, if you look at the use table,
Got it.
a couple pages down, there's not a lot of P's or L's on it.
Okay. Is there any reason why we couldn't have an additional district that was maybe an even larger lot size for things outside of the city? So that, because oftentimes developers will come and they'll make this threat that, if you don't annex into the city, we'll build under the county standards because the lot sizes are bigger than we would want them to be in the city, but small enough or small enough that it makes financial sense for them to build subdivisions according to those lot sizes on, large lot sizes, but big enough for a subdivision.
I think those instances are currently mapped as the RB district.
Just something to think about, just so that we have enough tools in the toolbox, so that we can protect open space until it is either in perpetuity or until it is ready to be developed. So right now, the zoning districts that we have, I think the minimum lot size for the most rural and restrictive zoning district that we have is like 2 acres. And that is like in the county. 3 acres.
3 acres.
So sometimes developers will come and they'll request an annexation from the city. And they'll say, if you don't annex us, we will build under the county standards because the zoning allows us to do that, even on large parcels. So how can we reach a minimum parcel size that is large enough that is disincentivizing them and incentivizing them to annex into the city so that when we are ready to urbanize, we are urbanizing and not, consistently getting this threat from developers to build large lot subdivisions.
I'm going to let Director Young, and then I have something.
Yeah, I'll just say that that's an empty threat. I don't think we have seen any subdivisions of 3 acre, or 2 or 3 acre lot subdivisions my entire tenure with this department. It does not happen. So I think I'm less worried about that, but I do think that kind of right sizing both the conservation district, which does not have residential, right? It's just conservation of land, and the preserve district are important.
Just to also add on to that, with the comprehensive plan, and there's many areas that you're referencing that are, I'm 100% speculative, that are potentially being rezoned for by right development. And so we have an advantage here with the comprehensive plan where we know where we want to urbanize and where we don't, right? And so we're trying to have the zoning reflect that and subsequently the development. And so an empty threat, or at least in my experience, but we also hope to see less of those threats because the hope is they would develop per the new standards.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to add, not only I think is an empty threat, for me, it's been a non-existent threat. I mean, you can't threaten me with what I allow you to do. It's already the standard. Now, I've in my years on the council, I've never experienced it as a threat. To Councilmember Baker's point, though, I do want to associate myself with controlling as much as we can and establishing, some standards that conform more to our values. But I do, however, just want to, I've never felt threatened by a developer. I mean, it would be stupid for them to do that and telegraph that that's their position and then come ask me for a vote to zone. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? And then I just wanted to add also, which is why I asked the question at the beginning, which was that preserve piece is outside the urban growth boundary. I know we're seeing some things around the urban growth boundary, but for the most part, most of the annexations have been on the inside of the urban growth boundary. And that's why we did that we did telegraph that we are expecting it to be denser gradually from, from where we are, but that is the expectation. The only way an urban growth boundary works is if you say on the other side, we're going to let you build more. Otherwise, we have a great example right next door, and they've been struggling with that for many decades. And in some ways, their lack of building housing made sure that their working class folks, teachers and nurses, had to buy in Durham County. Thank you, Councilmember Baker.
2 questions. One is, will we have some conditional zoning districts to work with? Because these are like base districts.
Yeah.
What do we do with like a Northgate Mall that are more complex, that are large lots? We saw a lot of pictures of nice square or rectangular lots. The reality of the city is that it's not really shaped like that, like a lot of Western cities are. So, how do we make sure, and like if we want a phasing plan for something, where's our zoning for that? So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is, we're consistently facing this management of outward growth. Large parcels, again, not these little square or rectangular parcels in the city. So how do we make sure that the growth that's happening is complete communities, that's walkable, mixed use, has those block links that we want, has the public dedication of parks that we want, and all of the different elements that make it a complete community. So it's not just one single housing type. So those are my two questions.
Yeah, so the first question that I posed about sort of the rezoning of the existing PDRs, and of course, abandoning the model of moving forward with those PDR requests, was the idea that those communities would develop and we would have the standards. We would see them in the module 3 in terms of infrastructure. We would really talk about creating those grids and the connectivity and the walkability, and certainly any sort of dedication of public land or amenity space. So that is hopefully addressing part of the question. I think Northgate's a great example of where the CX district is what we're imagining. Now, we don't have the process portion of the draft in terms of submittals and phasing and drafting, but I think so much of that is very much, to the conversation earlier, a lot of that is market dependent. And so I think the districts themselves, the idea is to allow the development that we want to see in those particular districts. But in terms of the phasing, I mean, that's going to be considered by right development, not a conditional zoning or a part of a larger rezoning.
Before we get to that second question, I would encourage us to have the conditional zoning as a tool in our back pocket, not completely get rid of it. Just because, and I've worked in a lot of communities, we've had these tough conversations where it's good to have that tool, because there are going to be large, complex sites. There are going to be, situations where you want to be able to sit down at the table with the developer and put some skin in the game and have the developer do certain things and work out the complex process of developing multiple phases on large parcels. So I really, really feel strongly that we should have a conditional zoning district in our back pocket or multiple. And then, I just wanted to ask the second question about, when a developer comes, requests an annexation on a 50, 80 acre parcel, how do we make sure it's not all one single housing type, more suburban sprawl? It's more of a complete community pattern.
Sure. So the proposed zoning, if it's RD, it would build or they would be permitted in building those. The mixed use or mixed neighborhood place types, those zoning districts are reflected here, and they would have the ability to build in those particular uses. I think there's still going to be some market dependency in those instances, but they would have the districts do correspond in terms of what we want to see, where we want to see neighborhood commercial, or where we want to see the mixed uses, or the mix of types.
So at this point with this current draft, we're saying developers can still come in 100 acres, only build housing, only build single family housing if they requested that zoning district.
If they requested that, the RD district would be the likely one.
I think we need to make a little more progress on that area and have some additional 1 or 2 zoning districts that are, again, kind of tools in our back pocket where a developer can come and request that zoning district that would have more, and maybe it's conditional, maybe it's just a base zoning district, would make sure that we're moving toward a more inclusive, walkable, trans-oriented city.
I'll let Director Young speak and then Commissioner Jacobs, and then we're pretty much at time.
So a couple of things on the conditional zoning. We still have, and we have not finished talking through with the consultant about this. We still have our development plan authority, right? Which is our Durham's special unique version of conditional zoning. So I think that will likely remain an option, which can be used with any district and can be a way to, for projects that may be a little more complicated. We also have the development agreements. And I think that's really the main space where we as government can get into the developer, benefits and trade-offs and things that we may want to work out for more complicated sites. So those are still things that are kind of in play, but we don't have answers yet because that's coming up in kind of the more procedural module, but we will get back to that.
Commissioner Jacobs?
Councilmember Baker was just referring to, again, I'm confused because I thought that the place type map would help us with that because, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe we need to look deeper at what we need to do because we're not going to be able to have a 15-minute community or a transit-oriented area unless we can somehow make sure we're going to be getting those things there. And so I guess I maybe need to go back and look at the place type map, but I thought that, I mean, how can we make sure we achieve that? Yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner Jacobs, that's a really good point. There are apartment, townhome place types integrated throughout that. So I mean, that is certainly what we imagine the place type map would address. The concerns Council Baker suggested. What I was hearing from Councilmember Baker was that no single family development only, or no only single family proposal. So that was the distinction.
I think my concern is that we just continue to build single-family suburban sprawl. And how can we make sure that our zoning tools are available to help us get away from that, to help us make sure that we are building the 15-minute, whatever we want to call it. I know 15-minute city is like a common term right now, but just that urban form that includes multi-generational housing, mixes of uses, walkability, publicly dedicated space, that all of the elements of a inclusive, walkable, transit-oriented city.
Thank you. And I'm just going to say this. I think we do that by not having opt-in options. I think that anything we add to make it more, I mean, folks are going to, again, we have to incentivize what we want to see. And so I think to making it as easy a process as possible to getting those things is the way we do it. I think that if we have more boxes to check, we want the least amount of boxes as possible and still get some of our core values. But I think that if we are saying you only get this if you meet these things, is actually we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So I think to your point around a 15-minute city, if we want it, that's what we want, then we build a UDO to just get that and not create extra layers for folks to do that. Go ahead, Councilmember Baker.
Agreed. I will say, I think the opt-in option does what you're saying, because it is by right. It is by right. And it does make the process, it would, in theory, make the process really easy. It makes sure that the developer doesn't have to come back for a rezoning.
Thank you. Go ahead, Director Young.
Yeah, I just want to caution that the denser we build, the more carefully we have to do it. There are definitely impacts, and what we're hearing from the community already about impacts of EHC and impacts of SCAD are negative consequences that they want addressed. And so the opt-in option gives us the chance to put those safeguards and those additional design things in place so that when people do build denser, it's doing it in a way that doesn't cause additional harm to neighbors and the rest of the community. So I would just say I'm a proponent of the opt-in because it does give us a way to balance those things.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and thank you, Bo. I think you're going to be back in front of us again. Go ahead.
My apologies, Gabriel. I know it's time. There is a map online. We will send you a link so that you can review it. We will bring that back, and that obviously will be a big part of the discussion moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I think the last item that we have is just our JCCPC meeting schedule moving forward, and then conversation on chair and vice chair starting, I think, in December.
You want me to talk about
Yes,
schedule?
thank
Okay.
you.
So knowing that the coming year is going to be very busy on the UDO front, we are recommending that you all go back to your monthly schedule, which is the schedule that you had years back. And we would ask that you kind of indulge in that so that we don't have to, we can keep the project on track and moving and getting y'all's feedback. And then we could revisit at the end of next year whether y'all want to go back to every other month. But that would be our ask.
Director Young, just so I'm seeing right now, January 8th, the meeting schedule, so we wouldn't have to go monthly until January.
Correct.
So our next one is December. We don't have to worry about November. And then the only thing that I'm going to say is I will not be here on July 2nd, 2025. So I'm just, that's our council break month and I will be requesting excused absence. Other than that, that's my only input.
If you all would like to take July off the calendar, we could do that.
Okay, so what I'm seeing is from the folks who will be on JCCPC, everyone's okay. We understand we're meeting monthly and that we will not be having a July 2025 meeting. But we're all aware that the expectation is we will now be here monthly. Okay, and then the last thing is chair and vice chair. We will be rolling over in December. No, I think last year was
It'll be January.
January. So in January, we will have elections. It should be, it rotates back to the county as chair and city as vice chair. It is my understanding based on seniority that Commissioner Jacobs would be chair and Councilmember Baker would be vice. And I just want to go ahead and let folks know that because responsibilities increase a little bit with those roles. So, thank you. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.